for the researchers and planners in the California community colleges. But we also do a lot of research and evaluation projects and technical assistance on the side, helping mostly community colleges, but also different organizations related to higher education. And so what I'm here today to share with you is a recent study that we did called Student Support Redefined, and I'm hoping that you will find this of use or at least of interest.
For me, I think it's more stable housing, financial aid. That's the biggest part. And also having a mentor towards the end of what I wanted to do.
Okay, there's one more right here.
To say the same thing. Had it not been for my mother's support or entering a mentor program at the JC level, I wouldn't have been able to, well, not that I wouldn't have, but that was what kept me going, was that mentorship that I had and knowing that my mom was always supporting me in my education.
Okay, now let's may have been in school more than 5 years ago. How do you think it might be different for today's students? What today is, or what's the same and also what's different for today's students in terms of what helps them be successful? What do you think?
I think it's the same as far as the financial aid, a stable place to live, and transportation.
Okay. Anything different for today's students?
I think access to online resources to help the school and social media.
In what way do you think that affects student success?
The social media? The social media can help and hurt. It can help in the sense that it can create a virtual sense of community, but there's also then the cyberbullying and putting your business out there, so it can hurt you professionally longer term. So there's plus and minuses.
Well, and again, going back to access, you know, budgets have hit the campuses. There aren't as many courses, so students really need to have a plan laid out where, so they can maximize their resources and get through in the appropriate time.
Yeah, I was going to talk about access as well, just because of the fact that so many people have gone back to school because of the economy, and so there's less staff availability. Not only that, but resource availability, such as the counselor. It takes a couple of weeks to get counselor and things like that. So access is big all that.
Okay, that's great. So I'm hoping a bit at the beginning to, again, kind of put it in context, and I'm hoping what you'll see is a connection between what you all just shared and what I'm about to share about the 6 factors that they'll resonate with you. So I'm just going to start really quickly with just a real broad, quick overview of what the study was and what we were attempting to do. So this was our general research question. So again, taking into consideration that all these budget cuts and that the money is probably not going to come back, and if it does, it's going to come back very slowly, and it's over a long period of time. So given that there's no new money, how do we support our students in and out of the class to help them be successful, paying special attention to African American and Latino students because of the achievement gap that exists? Okay, so that's where we started. What we did was we identified colleges within the state of California, again, community colleges, that either had high proportion of their population was African American or Latino, or they had exhibited high transfer rates among African American and or Latino students. And then we also tried to diversify it based on location, based on college size, based on urban, suburban, rural. And so this was the mix that we got. So these were the 13 colleges that did participate in our study. Our study consisted of 2 components. One was a telephone survey, and we were able to reach 785 students at 12 community colleges. And you can see we targeted currently enrolled students, students who had completed a degree or certificate within the prior year, or students who had stopped out a semester but had not earned a degree or certificate. And we got a generous portion of first-generation students, and then you'll notice that we had a very high proportion of African-American students because we did oversample for those. Because we were paying special attention to Latino and African-American students in our study, we needed to make sure that we had a significant enough proportion of students in the study to validate any findings that we had. So it wasn't just based on 2% of our study being African American. And so we actually oversampled African American and Latino students and had greater success actually getting African American students into the state. We also conducted focus groups at 4 community colleges and were able to reach 102 students through that. This is just some information that actually is not self-reported. It's from the data that the colleges submit to the state. So we didn't ask the students, did you take a test, did you see a counselor? This is actually based on information that's submitted to the state. And the ones that are of concern are these 2 in the middle about counselors and ed plans, and that that's less than half of students are receiving these services. Okay. The other, the financial aid number, the EOPS and the DSPS numbers do not represent statewide figures because of the oversampling that I just described. And then but the assessment test, the counselor, and the ed plan actually are pretty much mirror what you would find statewide in terms of use of services. Okay, so the factors. These are the 6 factors. I'm going to go through them. I'm going to continue to see what you might be doing to help students with those. So the first one is directed. So this really is just the idea that a student has a goal and knows what he or she needs to do to achieve that goal, what classes to take, what papers, what forms to complete, whatever it is that they need to do to navigate the system to achieve their goal. Okay? So my question to you is, what are some of the things that you do to help a student find direction? Help a student figure out what their goal is, figure out how to meet that goal.
Well, a lot of times when a student comes in to meet with us, it's because they haven't, they want to go to school, they don't know what to do. And that's the first step. So bring them in and, just ask them what it is they are interested in, what they're most interested in, see if they have an idea of what they want to study, and then start talking to them about their future plans, whether it's, I just want to go to school for a couple of months and get a certificate, or 2 years, or do you want to transfer out of here and get a bachelor degree, and talk to them about what all this means, because oftentimes they don't necessarily know what bachelor degree means. So just working through that with them and seeing what it is each individual wants and needs.
Okay.
Well, like Jason said about having a dialogue with them, I also ask them about their current situation. Do they have felonies? Do they have support? Do they have a network of support? Because a lot of times that will determine how well they're going to do. Can they do full-time? Can they do part-time? Do they need to do part-time as opposed to full-time? The length of time that they may have been out of school from the last time, and so they're going to need a lot more things with regards to learning, maybe even simple things because they may have been out of school for a while. So that's part of the dialogue, so that you can really get to know where they're at and have them start, where they're at, not where I'm assuming that where I'm hoping that they're at. Okay.
On behalf of somebody who's on the web seminar, somebody wrote in from UC Davis Guardian Scholars Program that says we have quarterly individual appointments to talk about classes as well as what they want to do, and then create a goal plan to achieve it. Who they can talk to and where they can go to get more information.
One of those come in virtual class for you, and so we're way at the beginning, and so what we like to try and do help them create goal boards or dream boards, and where one topic is careers that they would like to explore, and then from there we look at the local colleges first, Fresno City College and Fresno State, and see if that's something that they're interested in. Maybe take them to explore the campus and see that first.
Okay. These are just some of the things. It's not an exhaustive list. But these are some of the things that happen in the community colleges that help students find direction. So obviously counseling, what we call student success courses, they all have different names at different colleges, personal development, but it's that course that kind of teaches you how to be a successful college student. It includes, study skills, goal development, transfer research, all kinds of different things so that one helps you figure out what you want to do, helps you figure out what you need to get that done, okay? Another thing is sending students to career centers. I know with the community colleges, these are a dying breed. Unfortunately, the funding has disappeared for these, and it's only those really gung-ho colleges that carve out money or they attach them to something else, or somebody's part-time job is to be the career center director. But career centers are so important for students to be able to explore, having a place and someone to talk to about possible careers, a place to take aptitude tests and interest tests and things like that. Applying for financial aid actually sometimes helps students find direction because you have to have a major and you have to be on track for some kind of degree, certificate, transfer in order to qualify for financial aid. So that kind of forces people into picking a direction. Unfortunately, the downside of that is sometimes they just do one of these. Sorry, the people online can't see me. I'm covering my eyes and just picking something, kind of like pinning the tail on the donkey. So the downside to the financial aid piece. And then introductory courses are really just kind of those courses that introduce students to a particular career field, like Intro to Health, Intro to Business. And just, and it's really designed not so much to teach you about health per se, but to give you an idea of what it would be like to work in the health field, what it would be like to work in business or any of these other areas. Okay. So in our study, what we did was we asked students, we started off with the question that I basically asked you in the beginning, what makes you successful? Didn't introduce the factors first, just a very open question. What we found was that the vast majority of their responses fell into one of those 6 factors that we had identified. And the other 2 that didn't were, and we kind of look at this in terms of the internal versus external, intrinsic versus extrinsic divide. So all the factors that you remember, they're more kind of, they're intrinsic. The other 2 that came up, not in as high in numbers, but the other 2 that came up were financial aid and affordability. A lot of students have money, or if before college as it did, I wouldn't be successful because I wouldn't be able. And then the other one was scheduling. If you didn't have online classes, I wouldn't be successful because I wouldn't be able to go. If you didn't have evening classes, weekend classes, that kind of thing. So those were the other 2 that came up more often when asked what makes you successful. So when we looked at all of this, what we found was that the students were actually telling us what helps them. They were giving us very specific suggestions of what we as educators could do to help them in each of these areas. So I said at the end of each factor, I'm going to share just a few. And just so you know, the bolding piece doesn't necessarily have any significance other than trying to, because of time, it helps me just focus on one. But I said there's not one that's more, it doesn't denote any kind of level of significance or importance. So in this situation, what the students were telling us is that how big a role faculty could play in helping them figure out career goals. I said the counselors have to know a little bit about a lot, but the faculty know a lot about a little. And if that's, if you're really interested in health, the best people to talk to are the faculty who come from that field, or in business, or in computers, or English, or whatever the subject is. And so the students are telling us they want faculty to take a bigger role in terms of helping them do career exploration. Okay? So the next one is focused. And this is the idea of just, head down, doing what you're supposed to do, staying on track, keeping your eye on that prize, doing every day, staying focused. So what do you do to help students stay focused, stay motivated?
And even if you report that they have 3 contacts every semester, 2 with the counselor and 3 from the principal. And we also require that they hear the financial. And yes, they have not made a contact yet, but still it is an incentive for them to continue, because if they do continue on the program, they receive early registration for next semester. So that's one of the ways we try to enforce that they stay on track with my contact.
Okay. Anybody else? How do you help students stay motivated?
in my job role, it's school. Well, it's also school and employment. But one of my young adults just got a job, and she started today. So I texted her this morning and said, "Have a great day," and she texts back. So just kind of letting them know, like, I know you're going to work today. You know, keep up the good words, just sort of those little motivations. Just a lot of our youth like to text.
Good. One more.
One of the things they did with some of the students is she wasn't doing well in a class, and so what I contacted the instructor, and he was so willing to help. And she just was scared. She was scared to make that contact because we had talked about it. We talked to your instructor, and it wasn't happening until I kind of mediated the thing. Then all of a sudden, yeah, she reached out, and now there's a relationship.
Great. So again, not an exhaustive list, but one of the things that students told us was the ed plan and how it actually helps keep them focused. It's this idea of, number one, being able to see everything they need to do, but also what they want is not that static piece of paper. They want something interactive that they can see how that overlays basically their transcript on that plan. So they can see not only what they've already accomplished, but what else they need to accomplish. And I've been to a few schools that have this kind of tool, and students love it. And one of the students in one of the focus groups talked about how she uses that dynamic ed plan to motivate her. She said something to the effect of, when I'm feeling down and I'm really down on myself and I'm having a hard time, I pull up my degree work and I look at that and I go, look at everything I've accomplished. Look, I got an A in that class. I busted my what to get that. And she motivates her, and then she looks at it and says, and I just have this much more to go. I can make it. I can do it. Look at how much I've accomplished. I can do it. And so she uses it to motivate herself. So this is what students are telling us, that they need not just that static piece of paper. They need something that interacts with their own personal work. Regular and acquired, we've talked about this, that regular advising, somebody who's constantly checking in with them and saying, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And there's a bit of accountability. We found there's a link between having to be feeling accountable to somebody helps you stay focused. This is what the students were telling us. And then having, again, same thing with the mentor, and having that person that is, checking on you and you feeling responsible. It's like, and that students told us all the time, well, this person cared about me, so I couldn't possibly let them down. I have to succeed because they're helping me. I can't let them down. So this idea, and somebody mentioned this one at the beginning about feedback. Students were telling us they want regular feedback on how they're doing, especially from their faculty. We heard the horror stories of the student who finds out when it's too late that they're failing and they can't recover. They want constant and regular feedback. Where am I struggling? They want feedback. It helps them stay focused if they know exactly where they are, good or bad. Okay? I forgot to mention with Focus also, with African American students and Latino students, they actually drew a connection between the ability to have financial aid and the ability to get the classes that they need, as they playing a larger role in their ability to be successful. So it's more, I think it's about the distraction and being able to stay on track was really important, especially to them. I'm not saying it's not important to other groups, but they highlighted it more significantly. Okay, nurtured. Nurtured is this one that we've gotten a little bit of pushback on. People hear that word nurturing and then they go right to mothering or babying students or lowering expectations, and that is not what the students said to us. They said they just want somebody to care, somebody who cares about my success and then helps me succeed. So this goes a little bit beyond encouragement, because we can all be like, yeah, you can do it. Ooh. Okay, go do it. Versus, yes, you can do it, and let me see how I can help you. You need to go talk to this person. You need to go study this. You need to go this. You need to do that. So it's taking that one step further past encouragement. Okay? So what do you all do to help nurture students, to let them know that you care? What do you say or what do you do to let students know you care? Okay. You're getting your exercise today.
I've been in college for almost 5 years now, and for the first couple of years, I was having trouble kind of keeping in touch with the youth who were on campus. There was no reason for them to just come in and kind of tell me what was going on, so I could encourage them. So what I did was I set up once a month, on the first Friday of every month, we have lunch, and I provide lunch, and which gets them to come in, and then usually I'll have some kind of presenter there, one of the resources from our campus, whether it's EOPS, financial aid, the tutorial center, something like that. And so they get to see some of the other services that are on campus, and it's a good way to touch bases, say how you doing, whether it's on school or people are looking for jobs or housing, and it's created kind of a cohort among the foster youth or former foster youth that I'm working with there on campus.
Great. Okay.
One of the things I do with former foster youth here at Fresno State is they have access to me 24 hours a day through a cell phone. And so I found that in the past that having to come into my office and, even if it's a drop-in, having to walk across campus to tell me something that seems relatively small in the grand scheme of things but important to that individual or a question, having access to my cell phone with a quick text, I can eliminate their direct them, encourage them in a fairly quickly amount of time that's still meaningful. And so that's one of the ways that I've been trying to nurture students, but also minimize barriers without them having to come in.
You just got to listen to them. Less talking, more listening, open-ended questions, and not always be about business.
Excellent. One more? Anybody?
I'm really excited to see that you have really gone back to the faculty piece, and I think oftentimes we are one-person shops at campuses that, you're lucky if you have one individual maybe who is the go-to person for foster youth. I think that we miss oftentimes the power and the impact that faculty can bring, and so I think our challenges are how do we train and support and educate and motivate faculty to be involved at that deeper, more meaningful level.
Excellent. So again, some of the ways that we identify is that regular check-in, somebody that they have to check in with, whether it's an advisor, a counselor, whoever it is, but there's some kind of regular check-in, mentoring program, for obvious reasons, I think, and then learning communities. And again, the nurturing doesn't always have to be faculty, student, staff, student, counselor, student. It can be student. But we can facilitate that by creating opportunities for students to get together, and then the nurturing starts happening. Okay? This was an interesting one. When we asked students, how can we asked specifically, how can faculty show that they care about you? And the number one response is, make sure I understand. That you show that you care about me if you care that I'm learning. If you ask me, do you get it? If you're looking to see, do I get it? Are you struggling? And it kind of intervening. But just that simple act of, do you understand, was the number one way that students thought faculty could show concern. The other ones I just want to think a couple things to mention here about nurturing. One, it was unique among all the 6 factors because it was a catalyst to each of the other 5. Especially in the focus groups, it became very clear because a lot of the stories that students shared with us, they started with, well, there was this faculty member, there was this counselor, there was this some person. And then that made me get connected. That made me feel engaged. That made me find direction. That made me stay focused. There was always this thing that a lot of times the nurturing led to the other factors. And the other thing is the students pointed out, they're not looking for you to adopt them. You don't have to take them home. You don't have to call them to make sure that they go to class every day. They're not looking for a parent. They're just looking for somebody to care, to see them, to hear them, okay? And they also emphasize little things. Little things make a difference. I have to share the story about this, an older gentleman. He was an immigrant from Iran. He went to the campus, and he was completely lost. He was trying to go and take some classes to learn English. And he was wandering around and he couldn't find he didn't know where to go, and he wandered into the DSPS office. For those of you who don't know, that's the Disability Services office. He wasn't a disabled student, but he happened to just wander in there, and the woman who sat at the front desk helped him. He wasn't a disabled student. It wasn't her job. Her job is to answer the phone and direct people to somewhere else. But she took the time to help him figure out what he needed to do, where he needed to go, and how to get registered. And what that did, he basically said to us, if that woman had intervened, I don't know where I would be today. I might have gone to another college and tried somewhere else, or I might have just given up completely. He couldn't say either way. But what happened was he formed this bond with this woman who was the receptionist. And so that's the other thing that we're trying to get people to realize, that you don't have to have this official title of faculty or counselor or anything like that. Everyone can make a difference. And we have to think about our frontline people and the interactions that they have and how they could be making a difference in whether that student stays or goes, whether that student starts their educational journey or not. Okay, but this is what the students are saying. Little things make a big difference. Okay, engaged. It's just this idea that students learn both in and out of class, okay, and that they are active participants in their learning, that they're engaged. So what do you do to help students feel engaged in what they're doing? So whether that's their learning, and a lot of it I have more outside than inside of class when I'm in college. Some of you may have had similar experiences. I couldn't tell you what I learned in class. Probably couldn't have told you even 5 years after I graduated. But I can tell you what I learned outside of class and how that helped me. So anybody, what do you do to help students get engaged in their own learning?
And just how they actively listen, because you can always point out your class and how it relates to everything else around you.
Excellent. Anything else you do? Anybody else help students find the learning, get engaged in learning?
Hang out with, being close maybe that with suggestions of tutoring, go to the tutoring session, and then suggesting that you consider, hey, maybe have special days.
Great. Oh, one more.
Encouraging research opportunities with professors, research programs, internships, career fairs.
Perfect. So, again, just a quick list of things that the service learning, there's a lot of classes that require you to do community service, and it links it to the class. Obviously, leadership opportunities, both formal and informal. It doesn't always have to be student government. There's a lot of other ways that students can be leaders. Learning communities, when you've got, especially if you've got linked classes, where you're starting to see the connection between that English and that history class or whatever it is. Tutoring was big. This one actually was very significant to African American and Latino students. Their ability to engage was very closely linked to either the presence or absence of academic support in the form of tutoring. That really significantly impacted their ability to be engaged. And then having a job on campus. We've heard a lot of students talk about how having that job made them more engaged throughout. Okay, this feedback thing, this is now the other way. Students talked about how when they were asked for their feedback, it helped them get engaged. So when the teacher says, is this working for you? What could, that kind of thing, they're like, oh, well, now what you're going to listen to me? Well, now I'm going to pay attention. Now I've got a stake in this game because you've asked me for my input. I talked about the African American. I'm just making sure I'm covering everything. I'll talk about that with the next one, actually. I'll say that. Okay, so the next one is connected. Okay, so this is the idea that you feel like you're part of something larger than yourself, whether that's an entire college community, a small community within, a larger community outside the college or university. It's that feeling of being connected. So what do you do to help students feel connected? Anybody? Help? Okay.
struggling academically, and she has some changes that occurred in her life recently with reconnecting with her father that had been absent for a good period of time. And we talked about a study team that she can call together at her school to align some resources for her and make sure that she's being supported and that things are because she was concerned about falling too much behind and having that sense of loss that she can never catch up. And actually, she talked with her foster parent, and they called together a student study team, and she saw all these professionals come together and really support her. And we asked her for her feedback. What are some things that would be helpful? We identified a plan that we understood, and fall has to make up the credit, and then making a time frame of coming back and checking in. Because so many of our youth, what I have heard is that when we engage them, we also have to allow them the opportunity to have the learning experience of going through the process and maybe tweaking things up. And it doesn't mean that it didn't work. It doesn't mean that the suggestions were not good. It's just that we need to allow them for that to have that learned experience. And that's how we connected this particular youth with that community.
Right? Is that K-12 or post-secondary?
She's actually Madera Heights North. So she's a sophomore, and she's getting ready to. We're talking about college because the group was able to really connect with her, and it was her perception that, you know, she's a sophomore and she felt that she was so far behind that she wouldn't be able to graduate and go to college. And so we identified a clear plan, and she's at Madera High North, and she's actually doing quite well now.
I saw somebody here connected.
Well, like I said, one of my biggest pieces of success for myself was being connected to other people who were going through similar major at the same time, or life events. So, with that idea, that's kind of why I wanted to do the lunch group thing, get people to meet other people, and start to form that community. And out of that, we've been doing it for about a year now. The youth have decided that they want to start a club on campus to bring more awareness to foster youth. They want to go out and speak to foster care providers, tell them what they did like about foster care, what they didn't like about it. And by doing that, they're going to be outreaching to even more foster youth who aren't aware of what's going on with us on campus, because I know there's a lot more foster youth on campus than just the 20 or so that I deal with. So it's neat to see that they're now taking an active role in forming that community and making it even bigger.
Okay. Learning communities. Students told us being in learning communities help them feel connected, being in cohorts with other students, going through and taking the same classes, having the same teachers, mentoring programs, again, for obvious reasons. And the idea of a place. This is very, very big. There's a lot of campuses where there's no place for students to, quote, hang out, whether that's to hang out to study or to meet people or whatever it is that they want to do. There's no place for them to do that. There's no place for them. And so what we've found from this is that there are some things that we could be doing to facilitate connectedness among even the students themselves, but also there was this issue about connecting students with faculty and staff and breaking down some of the walls. Not so much like, you got to have respect and things like that, but just making faculty and staff more approachable. And see, there was this thing that came up about seeing faculty and staff outside of their roles. So seeing them, at some kind of a sociable event, where they're in jeans or, they're not there in their official role. They're not there to teach. They're not there to counsel. They're not there to administrate. But it's this kind of just seeing them as people and how that made making the connection with that faculty member, with that staff member so much easier. The other thing about connected is that it's really in what I call a bi-directional relationship with engaged. We found a lot of students that said either, well, first I got engaged in some way and then that made me feel connected. Or we had students who said, well, I felt connected and that made me want to be engaged. And so then I, sought out different ways to engage. So it's this idea of creating both formal and informal opportunities for students to connect with each other, with faculty, with staff that we need to do. The other one I want to mention here, and especially for my community college colleagues, is this idea where we ask the students, okay, what makes you feel connected? And after some students kind of shared a lot of what we were talking about, there were students that would say, why? Why do I need to feel connected? This is just a 2-year college. It's not worth it. I'm going to be connected when I transfer to the 4-year. This is just a stepping stone. I'm not going to be here that long. It's not worth it. And you're like, okay. But it's this idea that they don't recognize the community college as a significant portion of their educational experience. And the other issue is they have this idea that they're not going to be there that long, but the data show that they will be there at least 3 years. At least. Most of the time, they're there 5, 6 years. So this idea that I'm not going to be here that long, so there's no need for me to be connected, is incongruent with the data and how long they actually end up, the time they actually end up spending there. The second thing is, it's not highlighted, but this one about pride was huge. And this was also played into the why should I feel connected? This is just a 2-year college kind of thing. But along with that, they said, why should I feel connected when I can see that you're not? Faculty are not connected, staff are not connected, counselors are not connected, administrators aren't connected. Why should I be connected? And so I said that if you're not proud to work here, why should I be proud to go here? It's something to think about. The last one is valued. It's a little more complicated, but it's this idea that you recognize a student's talents and abilities, you give them an opportunity to share those, and that those what they share is appreciated. Okay? Any examples of how?
Mine is kind of tied with the connectiveness because I work with ELPS care students who are the single parents going back to school. A lot of times they feel very isolated. They're frightened to come back, like many other students are. We have required orientations for them, but during the orientations, they have a chance to share information with each other. And whenever someone shares something that's valuable, I can see their face. It warms them, and they share experiences with each other. So although we have it to tell them about the care program, actually it's for them to get to know each other and see each other. And they exchange phone numbers afterwards. It's really cool.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you do to help students, recognize a student's talent and then or help them find opportunities to share their talents, their abilities, their skills?
For me at Fresno City, we really try to encourage any kind of, if there's some sort of sport, we have them, even though our tryouts are really close and help students connect to sport activities, we have quite a bit of music kind of talent on our campus, anything having to do with artistic kind of displays, those kinds of things. And I'm really trying to find a way through social media for young people to share their passions so they can kind of use that. We have a Facebook page that we're trying to identify young people so they can kind of exhibit their talents or share their kind of experiences, and then other young people could be inspired by that kind of same action. So.
Perfect. So student activities, one way that students feel valued, that they're contributing something and that contribution is appreciated. Mentoring, both sides of that, the mentee and the mentor both feel valued in that situation, okay? Service learning, obviously community service, you feel this idea, student leadership, and focus groups. This was an interesting one because what happened was when I asked the question in the focus group, there was always at least one student who said, I feel valued because I'm here today, because you asked me for my opinion and you actually appear to be listening to what I'm saying. And just that idea of ask me for my opinion. And not in some superficial way, like you actually care what I want and that you're going to do something with it. The thing that came through with valued is that the students felt most valued when they were helping other students. And then a lot of times there's just little things, or it's like that older student in the class who has some experience and the teacher says, you used to work in this field, why don't you share something with this class? There are lots of these kind of examples, or you're really good at this. There was an example of this very spontaneous thing that happened at, there's this program called Emoja, which is for African-American students in the community colleges, and they wanted a theme song. And so they found the music, but there was one of the people who runs the program knew of this student who was an aspiring rapper. And she went and said, will you, sing, rap our song, and will you make up a rap, about Umoja and do that. And then they played the song for us in this session, and this kid was in the session, and he actually got up and did part of it. It was great, and it was like got this kind of live, spontaneous performance, but you could see what it had done for him. He didn't make any money off it. He's not, there's no record deal or whatever from that, but just have somebody recognizing what he likes to do, what he's good at, and then giving him an opportunity to share and contribute. Okay? So again, this opportunities for feedback. Students want to be listened to. Okay? And as if you notice, this feedback thing came up a couple of times. And this is one of the ideas, is that you can actually have one activity that covers multiple factors. So asking students for feedback gets them engaged, helps them feel connected, helps them feel valued. Okay? So we looked at all of this information, and we came up with these 5 kind of overarching themes based on this information. Number 1, students arrive motivated in most cases. Some don't, but most do. But there are things that we could probably be doing to help them stay motivated. Okay? We also need to make sure, we need to kind of check ourselves and make sure that what we're doing is actually not interfering with their motivation, causing them to lose motivation. Do we have practices, policies, interactions, behaviors with students that put them in a situation where they go, I'll give up. This is crazy. This is a stupid policy. I quit. Okay? We need to think about that. We also make a lot of assumptions that students arrive at our campuses knowing how to be successful students. They don't. Even at a 4-year, they don't. Okay? We cannot operate on the assumption that students know how to navigate the system, that they know how to study, that they know how to take notes, that they know how to read a textbook, that they know how to write. Okay? We need to take all of those things into consideration. Okay? This third one is about making sure that we have all the 6 factors covered throughout our services and in both in instruction and student services. Because every student doesn't need every factor to be successful. They don't need them all at the same time, in the same intensity, in the same way, but every student needs some combination of these. And so if we make sure that we have them all covered and we make it accessible to students, then we should have them, every student should be able to get what they need if we make sure that we have them all covered. And again, a lot of times it's one activity can cover 3 or 4 of these things at once. So it's not like you have to have, here are our directed activities, and here are our focused activities, and here are our nurtured activities. We can look for ones that cover all of these things. This 4th one is especially applies to underserved populations, which obviously includes foster youth. But it's this idea that when we went through this, we found, and I forgot to mention, about valued, African American, Latino, EOPS, and first-generation students all said being valued was very important to their success, more so than other groups in the study. Okay, this idea of being able to contribute, this idea of having their experiences, their history, their background, being able to share those and have those appreciated was very important to their success. What we found with those historically underserved groups is that they didn't just have one problem. They needed academic help, social help, personal help, financial help, and so this idea of providing comprehensive services still exists. And even with the budget cuts, we need to figure out a way to serve these student groups with comprehensive support. We need to figure out how to do that with less money. And then the last one is something I talked about earlier. Everyone on a campus, especially, but even if you work with campuses, has a role to play in student success. It doesn't matter what your job title is. Everyone has a role, small or large, direct or indirect. Everyone has a role. However, faculty must take the lead, because the one thing that all students have in common is a faculty member. Every student doesn't see a counselor. Every student is not in a special program, but every student has a faculty member. So we need faculty to step up and do more. That's what students are telling us. They want faculty to be more involved in their student success, not just teach. Okay? So this is just something about, this is a 3-year project. We're ending our 2nd year. This is some of the stuff that we're planning, doing dialogue, sharing the information. We're developing an action guide for community colleges to take this information and try to use it to plan for action. And then next year, we're going to focus on trying to identify like best practices and put those in some kind of a primer that people can use so they have some practical advice about how to do some of this. That's me. That's our website. That's it.
Thank you very much. So, a couple of things. Darla, do people have questions for Darla? Do people want to do a Q&A? Darla's leaving and going to the back of the room. Darla, do you want to come back up for a minute? We'll see, maybe just do 5 minutes for questions.
So, one of the things I noticed in this...
Hold on, technical difficulties.
One of the things I noticed that was common in the 6 factors, I don't think it was in every single one, but in more than half, was mentoring. Did you notice anything regarding formal mentoring versus informal mentoring making a difference in student success? Because I know a lot of programs for underserved populations have this type of form, you know, we got to create a formal mentor versus an attitude of mentorship. And did you notice a difference?
I didn't, and I don't think students care. It doesn't matter. I have experience from formal mentoring programs, and they sometimes tend to fall apart because they need a lot of coordination. And you have to make sure that you get the right people to mentor and that you make the right relations, the connection between that mentor and mentee. And so it gets very complicated. But I like this, what you called an attitude of mentorship. I think that's much more feasible to act. I mean, it's not easy to accomplish because you're talking about changing culture, but it's definitely more affordable than trying to pay somebody to run or relying on a volunteer to run. But I said we heard examples of both, where it was just kind of an organic mentorship. And I know me personally, I never participated in any formal mentor program, but I have plenty of mentors. But they were all organic. We were in the same place. We made a bond. They became my mentor. And even if we didn't put that label on it, that's what it was. But that's what the students, again, especially in the focus groups, we saw no appreciable difference between whether they were in a formal program or an informal program.
Maybe an observation and interested in your input on this. I saw how you talked about feedback from the youth, the focus group piece, hearing their voice, listening. In light of our funding sources, our wonderful foundations and investors in our work, there's really been a movement toward they're really interested in data-driven decision-making. And it's all about retention and persistence and, counting heads and, completion of units and all of that piece. Any advice about how to fold in that feedback piece so that we really, so that we use feedback actually as data and to support our work?
Well, I usually encourage mixed methods, as we researchers call it, where you're using both quantitative and qualitative because you don't get a either one. So that's why we had the survey, which was our quantitative piece, and then the focus groups we did those after the survey to supplement and complement the quantitative. So I think it's about finding balance and having dedication, quite honestly, because you have to do it with very little funding, and all of the accountability is about the head counts, the how many of your students were successful, and that's just here to stay, and you have to do that part, but that doesn't always help you figure out what you need to do to improve, and that's where the focus groups come in. That's where even doing those surveys and just even informal check-ins with students. A lot of faculty use that muddiest point, clearest point thing. We could do that with students and just change the language and say what's working for you, what's not working for you. It doesn't always have to be formal. It doesn't always have to be, quote, scientific research. I think we have to give ourselves permission because I think a lot of times people are afraid because we put this research label on it. I'm not a researcher, so I can't do it. I'm like, well, you know what you want to know, right? And if you have access to a researcher, you might be able to just run it by them and say, how does this question sound? Is it too leading? Is it too vague? You can find people who give you input on that, but you can be a researcher. I have a whole presentation about how you can be a researcher. it's geared towards faculty, but it still applies to whether you run, a student services program or whatever your role is. There's lots of ways to empower people to do their own research, and that you don't always have to, especially if you're just going to use it for yourself. Now, obviously, if you want to publish it, that's a whole other situation. But for the most part, you just want to use it to improve your program. So you don't have to worry about, I'm not a researcher, and then, doing that. So it's about your own commitment and dedication, and then a little bit of study and a little bit of consultation, I would call it, from a researcher, just to kind of make sure that you're going to get what you want. That's the main thing. Is like, am I asking this question in a way that's going to get me what I want? Okay. Does that help at all? Okay. Any questions from them? Okay.
You mentioned before that financial aid and access to classes seems to be an important factor to success for Latino and African American students. And do you think it has to do with that it creates another barrier for them, so they just get discouraged, or maybe that there's like a skill deficit involved?
I think it's more the former.
Okay.
It's more, I'm so worried about how I'm going to pay for this. I'm trying to raise my kids. I'm trying to keep a roof over head. I'm trying to put food on the table. And if financial aid just takes that pressure off, because now I don't have to worry about, covering all of my expenses with my salary, essentially. Does that make sense? And then just really get discouraged by not being able to get past the whole plan off track. And that, the distraction is really, I think it's more about distraction of both of those things. It really affects your ability to focus, because you're worrying about money. You're worrying about, this is going to put me back a semester. How am I, you start getting very distracted.
So coming from community college, another thing that we see, especially for foster youth coming in, is that they test relatively low on their placement tests on their first pass. And so it sets back their plan sometimes by a full year, a couple of years, because they have to remediate that English and that math to get themselves up to the level that they could be performing at when they come in. So it's along the same lines, but it's also encouraging students to know the resources of the different campuses. So here locally, being informed of, the format. So Fresno City gives 45 minutes, but we have a huge amount of questions, whereas Willow International has half the questions, they give 3 hours. And so and that's one of those things, that knowing where your young people could be successful and really guiding them towards those pathways beforehand. So, for the K-12 people in the room, that really helps them feel as though they're not starting with a deficit. They're not starting set back a year or two, because that's so discouraging when it starts.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if everybody wants to come back in, and you can go ahead and just continue to eat while we move on to our next speaker. So I'm very excited to introduce our host today at CSU Fresno, Kizzy Lopez. And she's going to kind of delve into some of the stuff that Darla talked about in more detail through the work, describing the work that she does with her program on campus here, the Renaissance Scholars Program. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kizzy. I did want to at the beginning, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now. For those of you in the room, how many of you actually work on a college campus? And how many of you work sort of in the K through 12 arena in some capacity? And how many of you work with current or former foster youth at a community-based organization outside of a college campus? Okay, so we're kind of evenly split, about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Anybody else that I missed? Okay, that's helpful.
What colleges are represented here? I know COS, Fresno City, Merced. Oh, great! Yay, Merced's in the house.
Madera Center.
Madera Center, great. So Central Valley folks.
Yeah. And we've got a whole bunch of other colleges on the phone. I know that. So we've got about 30 people listening in through the webinar as well.
So we do have higher ed folks on the phone.
We definitely have higher. I know we've got UC Davis. We've got Merced Community College. So, yeah, Merced College is on the phone. So, a bunch of college people on the phone. Okay, so I'm going to give you this. Yeah, you just like put this over.
How do we use this?
Get all my hair. This clear part goes back here?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Yeah.
And unfortunately, when other people are talking, you're going to sort of hear them here.
Okay. All right. No background music anymore from the students. So today I'm going to be expanding on a little bit of what Darla talked about with connectedness in terms of students in college. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about developing a sense of belonging as a retention strategy for foster youth in college. A little bit about my background. This picture of me when I had short hair, of course. It's longer now. As Debbie mentioned, my name's Kizzy Lopez. I'm a doctoral student at Azusa Pacific, but I also work here at Fresno State and coordinate the Renaissance Scholars Program, which supports current and former foster youth who are attending Fresno State. And I'm also a foster care alum. I think some of these pieces are important to understand the research that I conducted last year. My own experience as a foster care alum and being successful, I'm interested in figuring out what makes other former foster youth successful in college. As a practitioner that serves current and former foster youth, I want to know as a practitioner, what can I do to better serve my students? And as a developing researcher, I'm also interested in quantifying how higher ed professionals do their work to support foster youth. My presentation today, I'll be briefly reviewing a pilot study that I conducted last year. And I'll also talk about some promising practices, specifically as they relate to higher education. And then I'll leave some time for question and answer at the end. And time permitting, we may actually do some small work groups. Okay. So one of the things I'm interested in, as Darla mentioned, one of the 6 factors is connectedness. And so another term that I came across in my research is sense of belonging. How do students feel connected to each other, to a program, to a university? And how does sense of belonging contribute to student persistence? Because, you know, we all have to justify our work with data. And in a college setting, people want to know, how are your students persisting and are they graduating? Are they meeting their goals and objectives? And so I really wanted to quantify for people how sense of belonging helps to contribute to persistence. Because after listening, and you know, this is the first time I've heard Darla's research too, and I was like, man, this is spot on. It's a broader scope of all students. My study really focuses on just foster youth. And it's kind of, the findings, it's like, duh, right? We all know this instinctively, but I wanted to be able to help quantify it so that practitioners could use this information to justify using time and resources to help increase sense of belonging for our students, okay? And other studies have shown that sense of belonging does contribute to college persistence and retention, and so I just wanted to test it to see, does this really bear out with our foster youth as well? Okay, so this is actually my research question. To what extent does psychological sense of community, also known as sense of belonging, predict intent to re-enroll among former foster youth in California colleges? Some of the guiding framework that I used for this particular study is, if you're in higher ed and you're familiar with this Tinto's retention theory, sense of belonging, and Aston's model of input, environment, and output, because I did a quantitative study. Darla did mixed methods. So I'm kind of scratching the surface. I'm testing a question, and the next step for me was to do the qualitative piece. Okay. So what I used is a Thriving Quotient survey, which was developed by Dr. Lori Schreiner at Azusa Pacific, and it looks specifically at the domains of a thriving college student in undergraduate studies. And so I emailed this survey out to the directors and coordinators of all the Guardian Scholars and Renaissance and foster youth support programs in California, because I'm part of a consortium. And so this survey was sent out to UCs, CSUs, and community colleges. Students who participated in the survey were entered into a small $25 raffle. And it was a small sample, but 95 former foster youth students were respondents for the study, which is pretty good considering I had no social capital with any of these students. So in my analysis, I used a hierarchical multiple regression to kind of isolate to determine which variable was going to predict students' intent to re-enroll. And, oh, that kind of got screwed at the end. But the strongest predictor of students' intent to enroll was psychological sense of community, which is sense of belonging of all the different variables. And that ties in nicely with your study, Darla. So results from this pilot study just provide some data suggesting that sense of belonging is a significant predictor in helping foster youth to persist in California colleges. And former foster youth who feel a sense of belonging are more likely to persist. So that's a really brief overview of just that small pilot project. What I want to talk about is promising practice. How does this actually materialize, and what does it look like on a college campus? And some of this stuff is going to resonate with the higher ed folks, K-12 folks, even social services. You may be doing some of these things. I'm going to speak specifically about Renaissance Scholars, give you a short overview of what that program is, a student recognition ceremony, a residential program, weekly seminars, community building activities, and program apparel. Those are some things I'm going to highlight and things that we've done that has contributed to sense of belonging. How many of you in the room, by show of hands, are familiar with what Renaissance Scholars is and have heard of it before? So about half, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Renaissance Scholars, it's a comprehensive support program here at Fresno State specifically to support foster youth. We're a scholarship/support program, okay. It was established in fall 2008. Walter S. Johnson and the California Wellness Foundation were our primary funders in the beginning to provide seed money for our organization. And there are different foster youth support models in the state. We are EOP model, so that means our program is under the auspice of EOP. Our average year-to-year persistence rate for the past 5 years for our students is 88%. Our students are hustling. They're working really hard. I'm proud of them. And almost 70% of our alum are pursuing graduate or doctoral programs. So they're going on to do great things. So each year, Darla talked about this cohort model and how important that is in terms of contributing to student success. And it creates this peer-to-peer interaction. So each year, we accept a small cohort of students into our program. And we also do an annual recognition ceremony where we recognize the accomplishments of each of our students at the end of the year and also our graduating students. In this particular ceremony, we invite our incoming students to the ceremony and publicly announce them and say, welcome to our family, welcome to our community, welcome to Fresno State, and welcome to the Renaissance Scholars Program. So there's this public announcement, kind of like a birth announcement when you have a new child. Welcome to the family, okay? And one of our taglines is Renaissance Scholars provide former fosters with a place to belong, because that belonging piece is so important, okay? And so this is a picture of, it's a mixture of our incoming students from last year and our existing students and graduating students. Then we have a summer residential program, and this is not brand new. No one's going to be wowed by it. A lot of people hear of Summer Bridge and different transitional programs. So basically, we have a summer transitional program specific to foster youth. And it's not EOP Summer Bridge where they do academics. We don't even focus on academics. Because our students are EOP, they go to EOP Summer Bridge, and then they come to our summer transitional program where we specifically target issues related to foster youth around the emotional transition to college and aging out of foster care, the connectedness to team building, the leadership, and those pieces. And so we call our program LINK, learn, integrate, network, and connect. And it's for 4 days. And we do this like the week before school starts. The reason we do that is so there's no gap in housing. Our freshmen live on campus, and so that they can transition. And there have been times where we physically help them move their stuff into the dorm. You do what you got to do. So this was implemented in 2008. We started the program in 2008. We started the Summer Link program in 2009. And I'm going to show you some data and what our trends look like after we implemented this summer transitional program. The objectives for the LINK program is to help students become familiar with goal setting and strategies. And this could not, I promise you, me and Darla did not talk about this. The purpose is, you talked about the goal setting and direct direction. So we talk about goal setting and techniques. We talk about how students can gain knowledge about their physical, mental, and emotional health. We help them with money management techniques and how it applies to financial aid and how to manage their money. We talk about conflict resolution and the importance of building community and maintaining positive relationships, particularly because students are living in the dorms in close quarters, and learning how to interact with faculty, down to how do you send an appropriate email to faculty? How do you talk to your faculty when you need assistance? How do you resolve conflicts with staff members and faculty and peers? There has to be, so teaching those students little manageable social skills. We also begin to introduce students to their leadership style. Every student has different leadership abilities, and we talk about that strength base and that skill set. And so we want to start speaking that into their lives and helping them become self-aware. And so we introduce the leadership styles to them during this program. And then last, we provide opportunities for students to better understand themselves. And we actually have a therapist come to work with our students to staff leave so that they can do some group work together and talk about that emotional and psychological transition to college and into adulthood. So this is kind of a snapshot of our first year freshman retention after implementing the summer residential program. Our very first year, fall 2008, we did not have the summer residential program. We only retained 57% of our first-time freshmen, which was a disappointment. So the staff and I talked about what can we do more, and we found out that housing was a huge issue for students, and not knowing each other. They showed up the first day to an orientation that we had and had no clue who everybody was. So in fall 2009, we implemented this 4-day residential program, and you see that the retention of the students went up quite a bit. And it was our first time, so then we tweaked it a little bit and really pushed for students to live on campus. And so for the past 2 years, we've had 100% retention of our first-time freshmen, and so we're waiting to see what the data bears out this year. But it's made a huge impact, and if you're in higher education, you know that the first year is so significant in predicting persistence to graduation. So they really need a lot of support. And another study that I looked at by Dr. Strayhorn shows that for underrepresented students, he did a time test, and for underrepresented students, social integration was more important in the beginning than the academic integration. And so you get them connected in the beginning, which the link does, and then throughout the year, I'll talk a little bit more about what we do to help students prepare academically and be engaged. So we have weekly seminars. This can be done at any campus, and I want to tie something in. Darla talked about how a lounge space is so helpful, a drop-in center. Who has the money for that? Please let me know. And so when I had the privilege of doing site visits back in 2007, 2008, and I had the opportunity to go to 4 campuses that were far more established and had more money. Unfortunately, our program started the year the recession hit. So I saw these beautiful lounges at Guardian Scholars Fullerton and Pomona, and I said, what in the world are we going to do to create this sense of community without a physical space? Okay? And so the reason I highlight that is because more campuses than not do not have the money to create a physical space for people. So you need to get creative and think about other ways to create spaces for students to engage. And so one of the things that we thought about doing was creating a weekly seminar. In the fall semester, we meet once a week as a group. It's mandatory. People have to schedule their classes around this. In the spring, we meet bi-weekly. And the things that we focus on during these weekly seminars are time management, test-taking skills, stress management, those things that Darla talked about in her previous study that we cannot take for granted. We have to teach our students how to take notes, how to read a textbook. We actually draw a physical map and teach students and show them who is your network of support. You map it out. I want to see the names. Keep it in your folder, okay? So they have a visual of who their network is, how they're going to be academically prepared. We also have other guest speakers that come in that focus on healthy relationships, professional development, preparing for grad school, a wide variety of topics, okay? So this creates a time and a place where students meet. If I had a suggestion for people, I know some people do the same thing and it's unit bearing, but you don't have to create units, create the sense of community. Community building activities. So outside of this workshops and this very kind of rigid, learn this, learn that, I joke with my students and say, we're going to have some mandatory fun. Mandatory, you're going to have fun today when we get together. So there are certain seminars that are dedicated to just having fun, getting to know each other on a more personal basis other than just sitting in a room like this and learning something. You're learning about your peer, you're learning about each other. And so the students, you talk about adding the skill set, the students can use their skill set to contribute. We actually have students plan these events. We don't do them. I just provide the money. So students, plan these events. They bring in other student volunteers, and they are creating these activities for one another. And so they've done really fun stuff. Like, you want to see the funniest thing ever? Have a bunch of college students do an Easter egg hunt and tell them there's money in an egg. It's hilarious. You think college students wouldn't be into this? It's hilarious. Pumpkin carving contest. So each activity we do is themed. Our students tend to theme each activity. They really love it. The other thing that we do to create a sense of family and belonging, I know a lot of other campuses do this. You could do it in a variety of ways. But we have a Thanksgiving dinner, holiday dinner, and Santa comes every year and gives them a present. The presents are donated from people in the community, so we don't have to come out of our budget. And again, I was a little nervous about Santa showing up at a college event. But they collapsed when they heard his jingle bells coming down the hall. They were sitting on Santa's lap and taking pictures. It's a great way to get students connected. It creates wonderful memories and creates that sense of family. And then you talked about the service learning piece. In my own experience, I will share when I was transitioning into college, it was a dark period in my life, but I had somebody from a church community who forced me to volunteer. And she's like, you need to get outside of yourself. And so that experience impacted me, and the value of contributing to the community is important. So students are not here just for themselves, but they know that they can contribute to the community at large. And so as a group, we pick a location and we volunteer. It creates memories. We take photos together. We are very intentional about sharing how many dollars were raised, the impact that it has in the community. So it's not like just volunteer and check it off. The other thing that we do is also help students be able to articulate it when they're in an interview, how to write it down on a resume. I have some students who are really engaged on campus and in the community, and I have other students that they only do the thing that we make them do. And some of them grumble, but when it's time to apply for internship, when it's time to apply for grad school, like, oh my gosh, thank you for making us do this. I have something to put on my resume, okay? So it's valuable from a practical standpoint and also from an emotional and psychological standpoint. So one thing I want to draw out is the things that Darla had in her research bear out for our foster youth as well. Program apparel. This is where I get the most push from administrators, and I am just gung-ho, stuck on trying to prove it empirically, research that it's valuable. I think having some symbolism, it doesn't have to be necessarily your program logo. You guys are all part of different organizations. It could be College of Sequoia's pride. If you don't have the money to buy your own apparel, there are other ways that you can maybe get your institution to contribute shirts. But it goes back to that thing that Darla mentioned about a sense of pride, a sense of identification. And so for our students, this student here in the middle with Santa Claus, that she was part of our very first cohort where she didn't know anybody coming into our program. And when they saw students on campus that said Renaissance Scholars, like, oh, you're for the FOSTE. Oh, you're part of the same program. That instant connection. Now we have the summer residential program so students know each other, but that provides, I think, a sense of connectedness in a way that's not, it's tangible. What's that? Go ahead. Yes. So upon college entry, we provide students with different apparel, backpacks, shirts, and so you have the Summer Link program there. The holiday dinner, they get, every cohort gets a sweatshirt, and every cohort has a different color. And then at graduation, we have the sash, which I can't take credit for. I got that idea from Cal Poly Pomona. The light blues for Foster Care Awareness Month. But our students, they're presented with that at our student recognition ceremony, and then they get to wear that sash when they walk across stage at graduation. This is a quote that a student had shared with us. She emailed me. It said, I just wanted to thank you again for the Christmas dinner. I greatly appreciate all that RSP has done for me. It truly means a lot to come to events such as these to see friendly faces. Your gifts were wonderful. I love my sweater. It's awesome. I will be sure to remember this special Christmas dinner each time I wear my sweater. So, in summary, one thing that I want to share with you guys is that Darla's study tells us across demographics, sense of belonging is important and contributes to student success. This initial question that I ask bears out with our foster youth. How do you create a sense of belonging? I just shared a few things that we do here on our campus, and I know other campuses are doing. But how does this bear out at your particular institution if you have challenges with administration who don't believe it's important to have apparel, to have, why would you have a Thanksgiving dinner? Why in the world is Santa Claus important at Christmas time for college students who don't initially make the connection? And how do you do it with limited financial resources when you don't have a drop-in center like Cal Poly Pomona and Fullerton and large donors? And so one of the things that I want to do today, and I want to check in with you, Debbie, if we have time. We have time for this activity, the work group. Okay. Okay. So first we'll open it up for questions, and then I have an activity where we could break out in work groups, because it's, I think for me it's important that, okay, now you've heard about Darla's research at the community college, you've heard about this other studies, particularly to foster youth. So my call to you is a call to action. What are you going to do about it to create this sense of belonging now that we know from a qualitative, quantitative, anecdotal, you guys know it from your own life experience and working with foster youth. What are you going to do to help create a sense of connectedness and belonging that contributes to student success?
Yeah, and so really quick, I just want to say for those of you on the web seminar, so we're going to take some time now for Q&A, and we do have the questions panel on your screen, and so if you have questions or comments you want to share, go ahead and type them in, and we'll make sure that they get directed to Kizzy. And then we are going to do a group exercise in the room, which unfortunately those of you on the web seminar won't be able to participate in, but that's why we're going to sort of make sure we get all of those questions answered first from those of you who are on the phone. A couple other things I want to say is that the whole presentation will be available on the California College Pathways website, which is cacollegepathways.org. So the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of the seminar will be available. So if you want other people to listen to it or you want to listen to it again, that will be posted on our website within the next week or so. And the other thing that I want to say is California College Pathways, what we are here to do, our mission in life is to help college campuses better support foster youth. And so if any of the things that have been talked about today are exciting to you or interesting to you and it's something that you want to develop more on your campus but you're not quite sure how, you know, we were only able to give you kind of a flavor of a lot of this information in a 2-hour seminar. And if you want to go more in depth and have somebody actually come to your campus and work with you to try to figure out how you can implement some of these strategies within the context of your own campus, that's what we here at California College Pathways are available to do. So you can definitely get in touch with me, Debbie at johnburtonfoundation.org, if you're interested in learning more about that or talking with me about the ways that we can come and assist you. And so with that, I'm going to turn over to questions.
Oh, okay. So does anyone have any questions?
Were you ever able to develop a drop-in center after that?
Oh, no, we haven't.
Okay.
You know, specifically on our campus, space is at a premium. And I had to advocate so that I had a private office because there wasn't an understanding that I needed confidentiality. So to get a drop-in center was a bit of a stretch when I'm trying to have a private office, one battle at a time.
I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about the research in terms of that survey that you administered, give us some ideas of how it was measuring sense of belonging. I don't know if you have like sample questions or anything that you can, just to give us some context, measures through that survey.
Okay. Yes, you know what's throwing me off a little bit is I could hear you in my ear and then also hear you in the other ear. So I'll give you some the voices in my head. So I'll tell you a little bit about this survey. There's 5 domains, and don't test me on it because I'm not going to remember all of them. But there are 5 domains that this particular survey measures around not just a student that's successful in just surviving, but a student that's really thriving, that's really engaged in the community. And so the sense of belonging is actually a composite variable that has 3 variables in it. I feel like a sense of belonging to the campus. I feel like I be connected to faculty and staff or peers. I cannot remember off the top of my head. I have it written down. I should have brought it. But it's 3 variables that are brought together in a composite variable. So really asking students if they feel connected on their campus. Okay, it isn't specific to a foster youth program. One of the things that I'm working on now, now that we have 5 years worth of data for Renaissance Scholars, I've drafted up a survey and I've administered it to students, specifically trying to identify what services help create a sense of belonging among foster youth at this particular campus. And this is just a pilot study for me, and I hope to develop it more through my dissertation. I really want to know what activities make a difference and create a sense of belonging, and if there's a difference in institution type. Because, you know, you have different types of institutions faith-based CSUs. Maybe our campus is more of a commuter versus Monterey is residential. And so I'd like to dig into what activities contribute to sense of belonging based on institution type, because it's really going to shape the types of activities that help students persist. I don't know if that answers your question. Is it?
Measure students, you know, our goal was to come up with a scale of how directed are you, how focused are you, how connected are you. So that's why I was asking about how you were measuring connectedness.
Okay, and it's a Likert scale that says strongly agree, disagree, that piece, and it is brought together in a composite variable. Mm-hmm.
So you have a question from somebody on the web seminar. Question is, do you have any thoughts about how to create a greater sense of community for a program serving students that originate in LA County but disperse to schools across the country?
Yeah, that's a challenge. My first response to that is a virtual community. Use technology. The other thing is, I know other programs, we do the same. They have an alumni, especially if you're at a university, some type of an alumni association, and allowing students to come back for special events, to do virtual mentoring if they cannot do it in the physical location, and also having a social media presence where you can connect on that level. I'm part of a Foster Care Alumni of America online, and there's some people in there, I've never met them in person, and I feel like I know them because we're interacting on the social media level. We have shared experiences in life, and so social media could be very powerful, and so that's some of the recommendations that I would make. And we're actually looking at starting a virtual mentoring program for Renaissance Scholars so that we can engage our alumni and our current students.
How many students do you serve through your Renaissance Scholars program?
Maximum of 40, and we admit on average 10 students a year, but that depends on our students who are graduating and our attrition, which our attrition is low, thank God, but it doesn't leave a lot of space for a lot of students. But we do help all former foster youth that come to our office, but not everyone could be counted as a Renaissance Scholar. There is a high level of commitment if you're considered a scholar, because it's tied to money. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
In your program, you have a sense of like peer-to-peer mentoring or student-to-student. Do you have any, like maybe not so formal, but are the students? Well, I guess it obviously would be encouraged to have like a faculty interaction with their with the students in the program. But do you invite faculty to partake in your program, or is there a sense of that?
For faculty, no. The peer-to-peer interaction happens naturally through our summer program, and we do have peer mentors in our summer residential program. And then it happens kind of organically when we meet for the community building seminars. We intentionally have activities where people get to know each other. And also we have a Facebook page where students can engage. And I've actually seen students say, I feel like giving up on school. They're like, no, you can do it. Call me if you need me. I'm going to inbox you my number. You know, I'm coming to your dorm room. So I've seen this interaction. I haven't documented because I haven't got anybody's permission. But I see these interactions where they're encouraging each other. We also have a professional. Students can partake in a summer internship where we pay them to volunteer in the community, something related to their major. You talk about that at a classroom experience. So we do have students participate in a summer internship, and the site supervisor acts as a professional mentor. After what I've heard today and hearing about some of the other programs, faculty relationship and interaction is something I would like to move in that direction, and so I'm really open to suggestions because I know you've done that in the past. And I think it's beneficial.
being at a K-12 level now and transitioning from higher education and having experience with a very successful formal faculty mentoring program, and then looking at the K-12 and in particular secondary high school level, a lot of our high schools are interested in mentoring and wanting to see that connection of, the sense of belonging and connectedness and helping students succeed. But I always wondered with my program, because my program was very similar to yours in the sense where we had monthly activities and we provided guidance, and I always wondered, and I never did a study to see, was it the success of the program and the connection of a successful belonging program that kept these students in school, or was it their connection to a faculty member? And so looking at trying to backwards design it at a high school level, I always wondered, so do we need a coordinator now at the high school to run a successful program, or do we really need, the professional development for mentors, and that the financial and the resource-driven more towards faculty and training them and connecting them with students, or is it really a program that can really make these students belong and not make them, but help them with belonging?
I think one of my hesitations with the faculty mentoring piece is, in my mind, the amount of training that would go into it and sensitivity, because there are community members, donors, and faculty who have said comments to me that stigmatize foster youth, and I think they're a very vulnerable population. So I'm very, very careful about coordinating formal mentorships, because if it has my seal of approval, I need to make sure that these faculty members have gone through rigorous sensitivity training and safeguards, because for both ends, for themselves and also for the student. Kind of like in my mind foster parenting, go in with great intention but not fully skilled and prepared, and the relationship is hurt and dissolved. And I'm really hesitant about that. I think there's a lot of value in it for the average student, but I'd be curious to see what that looks like for our foster youth. And so if you have information experience with that, I'm all ears.
The program that I did run, it literally took them a year to become a mentor. And they had some trainings, and they were almost like a pre-mentor, and it took a lot of time and effort. And I inherited a very successful model, but other mentoring programs in the CSU system kind of dwindled out because they didn't have that sense of that model of a very comprehensive mentoring, professional development. And that's my fear of doing something at the secondary level, is that sense of commitment that a staff member would need to have, and training involved and all of that.
In a K-12 setting?
High school, yes, or in a K-12 setting. I looked at different models, like, with the Boys and Girls Club and different type of models that have somewhat mentoring, but that formal part seems to be missing in a lot of them.
Yeah, it's tricky. And then I wonder what role the caregiver would have in that relationship to the faculty member.
Getting back to the whole, the mentoring model, it's not only the intensity of the training, but it's also coming alongside and supporting that mentoring relationship. You just don't send them off and they're off on their own. But it's also trying to keep that relationship intact, because if you can get to that year mark, there are huge outcomes. If you can get to the 2-year mark, even huger outcomes. So mentoring is done right. It's very time intensive.
It is. It is.
So I'll give a couple closing words, then we're going to kind of move into an exercise. So a couple of things. The conversation about mentoring is very interesting to me, and we actually are embarking on a project to pull together information for mentoring programs, specifically for this population, to prepare some information that folks can use if they're interested in doing mentoring programs. So keep your eyes open for that information down the line. The other thing I want to let folks know is that we are having the third of our Lunch and Learn series, which is going to be in the Bay Area. So for those of you on the web seminar that are in the Bay Area, you can come in person, and those of you who are in the room, you can have the experience of what it's like to hear it via the web seminar. We're going to be focusing on kind of a cohort model of support, as well as a speaker who's going to provide some information about trauma-informed care and some things related to the mental health component of working with foster youth. So that's going to be coming up in June, so watch your emails for the announcement on the specifics for that. And with that, I'm going to end the web seminar portion of today's training. So thank you all very much for those of you on the phone, for listening in and participating. For those in the room, we are going to go ahead and do some kind of group interaction. So this concludes the web seminar portion of the training. Thank you very much for all of you for participating.